Good morning, everyone. My name is Elliott Young. I'm from EMC Consulting, the part that deals with cloud and data center consulting. And as you heard, joining me later to help answer some questions as well will be Rashmi from RSA. Now, before we start, and before I tell you a bit more about my role, I'm interested to know a bit more about you guys in the audience, because we've been looking at themes this morning which say that basically you have to have an idea of the big picture. You have to have a comprehension of the business as well as the technology. So how many people here consider themselves to be mainly business-oriented with some technology? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, good. And how many people think mainly technology-focused with a bit of business as well? Okay, so a good split of people there. I think that's one of the important things. You have to have that appreciation of both parts of it. I mean, my role is to go around and oversee the projects that we deliver in cloud consulting. And I'm going to share with you this morning some of the things that we've found through observation of those projects, some of the pitfalls that we've seen, some of the learnings. And I want you to, as we go through these slides, have a think about your own projects. Think about the things that you're doing right now which could benefit from these approaches. See which ones you could take advantage of in the future. So what are we going to cover here? So we're going to talk about, first of all, starting off with some common definitions to say that we're all on the same page. We'll talk about what security is in this context. And then we'll go on to talk about some of the myths. Now, you might be familiar with this kind of structure, but we'll go through myths to say, is that myth true? Is it confirmed? Or is it completely wrong? In which case, is it busted? Or is there not enough information yet to be able to say one or the other, in which case, is it plausible? Then we'll go on to a summary and time for some questions. So why EMC? Well, I can tell you that internally with EMC, they're absolutely obsessed with cloud computing. That's all they do at the moment. The focus has been away from storage into cloud computing. We've been doing some research with McKinsey to back this up with evidence, and they've analyzed data from Gartner and IDC, and I'll be telling you a bit more about how that fits in later on. But you can see from these numbers that EMC is putting in over $1 billion a year just in investigating cloud computing. So let's talk about some definitions. What makes up a cloud? Well, these are the typical 5 areas that people normally say, and the 2 that I think is important to bring out for this is the element of self-service and automation. So if you think about your existing IT systems that are not cloud-enabled yet, you're not doing private cloud yet, then it's quite unlikely that you're going to have a scenario where your own internal users are setting up their own systems and doing that in an automated way. So what are some of the challenges around that? Another area here is the elastic nature of cloud computing. So how can you architect systems so that they expand, but then have the ability to contract as well? And when they do that expansion, where do they expand to? Well, if we look at the different approaches to cloud, there's lots of different service models, and people this morning have already mentioned areas such as infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, etc., etc. So I'm not going to cover those areas this morning. Instead, what I want to do is talk about the 4 main different types of cloud. Can someone suggest what one of the main types of cloud is, which I've already mentioned? Yep. Private cloud, okay? Private cloud is the common one that lots of people think of when they're looking at re-architecting their own enterprise solutions. But then you've also got the other extreme, which is public cloud. So those 2 are pretty common. But what's not so common is the idea of a community cloud, and this is more typically used by government-type organizations or education. And then at the bottom, we've got hybrid cloud, and this is the bringing together of the 2 different types of cloud. And lots of people haven't actually considered that as an option, although it should be an aiming point in the future. So what do we use these different types of clouds for? Well, you can see all the common ones up here that you'd think of to do with public cloud, such as mail, collaboration, and the bottom, enterprise systems running in the private cloud. But the surprising thing here is, look at this hybrid cloud bar. It's pretty small at the moment, and I think that is going to change as all of the technology starts to mature. Because having done some analysis with McKinsey, they looked at what are the areas where you can really save the biggest amount of IT spend. And I know there are lots of other benefits to do with innovation that we've heard about in the previous sessions, but if we just focus on how do you reduce the spend, then what was quite surprising to EMC was that, yes, private cloud is a good way to go, public cloud is a good way to go, but actually if you want the biggest benefit, you need to be thinking about a hybrid cloud solution. So some cloud solution internally, perhaps taking advantage of the Google solution or Amazon or Microsoft solutions out there. And in that case, the type of savings we're looking to achieve in that area should be around about the 30% mark. Now, 30% is a huge amount of saving if you look at your IT budget. And this links to Google's presentation this morning. They were saying that you should be aiming for this kind of saving. So how does that apply to security? Well, what's the main organization that you think of when you talk about security? I guess lots of people think of the American CIA, but CIA is a good way to think of security because it's confidentiality, who's getting access to your data in the right place, integrity, how much confidence do you have in that data and do you really trust the data that you're looking at, and availability. Is it there at the right time for the people that need to know that? So let's start off by taking those first 3 letters. We'll put them on the page. What other 3 letters do you normally associate with security? There's a lot of hype about this at the moment because people getting attacked. There was the whole notion of the Sony problems. Even RSA have had some interesting incidents in this area. And if we look at the other 3 letters you normally associate with that, that would be governance, risk, and compliance. If you put all of those areas together, then we come up with what we call the EMC trust framework, or the trust wheel. And actually, we've gone to a lot of effort to flesh out a huge amount of collateral underneath that to be able to describe what are the areas that you should be looking at from a cloud computing point of view in a realistic day-to-day migration towards cloud computing. So I'm not going to go into all of these details here because we could spend all day just talking about all the background behind each of these points. But just have this in the back of your mind as we're going through and examining some of these myths. Right. So as I said, I'm going to use this structure, which some of you are familiar with already, I guess, which is the Mythbusters TV show. We're going to look at the first myth, which is, I can only move new services to the cloud. I've got too many legacy systems or services or applications, and I really don't understand the security implications. So let's investigate that one. So imagine the scenario. You've just taken over a new IT department, or you're a new CIO. You don't know what's installed. You've got a change management process, but are people really keeping the CMDB up to date? How much faith do you have in that CMDB? Even if you did know all of the applications and servers and services that you've got installed, do you know how busy they are? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know what the dependencies are with other parts of your environment and externally? So how do you get over this challenge? Well, I'd say the first thing to do is to consider an automated blueprinting solution. And to do this, you can go out and buy your own software. There's lots of different types, or you can have it as a service from a service provider. But the idea here is that you set up an automated system which can detect every time somebody plugs in a device into your network. And when it detects that plugging in of the device, it automatically updates its database with all the configuration data about that device. And it can be a server, it can be a switch, anything basically that's plugged into the network. Now, you can use that data in the database to either update your own CMDB to keep that up to date, or you can use this to start to prioritize your migrations into your new cloud environments. So how do you prioritize those? Well, you need to be looking at how busy they are, what's the workload, what's the complexity, of course the security constraints, and then once you've got this raw data, you can attach the raw data to the costs that you have for your own internal organization and use that as another mechanism to prioritize which systems you're going to migrate into the cloud first. So why is it important to understand these kind of dependencies? Well, this here is a picture of a plate of spaghetti. Now imagine this plate of spaghetti represents your IT systems, and inside here, buried in here, there are some meatballs. Okay, imagine if I want to pick up one of those meatballs and move it across and drop it on a clean plate and give that to someone else. If I plunge my hand into that plate of spaghetti and pick up a meatball, there's going to be all bits of spaghetti hanging off it. I don't know what spaghetti I'm going to get. Maybe there's another meatball dangling off the bottom of that. But if that meatball happens to be your data warehouse system, okay, if you pick it up and try and move it into a private cloud or into a public cloud, you better be sure that if you're moving the data warehouse system, you're also making a change to your backup environment, perhaps to your Active Directory service, perhaps to the system that feeds the data into the data warehouse in the first place, the order processing system. So what are you going to get